Hello, welcome to Muriel's Murders. I'm Muriel, and I love true crime.
I'm Nick, and I am not a fan.
Thank you for joining us. Each week, I force Nick to listen to me tell him a story of a true crime. This week, we talk about property disputes, improperly stored sewage, and that time Marvin Heemeyer destroyed a small Colorado town with a killdozer.
All right. Because you were like, oh, the name of this episode is Killdozer. And I was like, ooh, what's he going to be? Is he like a futuristic cyborg?
Oh, that's awesome that you thought the guy was the killdozer.
I totally thought that was, but he actually invents.
He invents the killdozer.
Oh my God. Well, you want that to be like cool and like fictional and, you know, like a Mad Max kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
But
it is. But I'm telling you, you don't know.
Right. Well, I just hope he uses it for good and not evil. But I have.
Nick, do you really have a question about that?
It's true crime, so he's gonna be bad. All right, great. But there are people that are good. We have to give a huge special thank you to Bambi and Kirsten for signing up for our Patreon.
That's right. When we're researching and editing and doing things and we get little notifications from Patreon on our phone, it's the best feeling in the world. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you.
Thank you kindly.
All right. This is a story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and they don't want to hear about those kind of things, please consider listening to a different podcast.
And we might end up cursing and cracking a few jokes, so if you find that offensive, please consider yourself warned.
All right, Nikki, are you ready to hear this story?
No!
Okay, let's get started.
Killdozer, murder in disguise. All right, I'm excited. Hit me, Muriel. What you got?
Okay. After years of disputes with his neighbors over zoning issues, property sales, and the old cement mixer that he liked to store his sewage in, muffler repairman Marvin Heemeyer destroyed Granby, Colorado with a modified Komatsu bulldozer. And this is the story.
All right.
So Marvin Heemeyer was born in 1951 in South Dakota. And after serving in the Air Force, he settled down in this small town called Grand Lake, Colorado.
All right.
It's a tiny mountain town. It's remote. There's cheap property there. And even though he was kind of, young and fresh out of the Air Force, he was able to purchase this home with like a fantastic deck that had a hot tub in it. And like the hot tub looks out over basically snow-covered forest.
Oh, great. So just back in the day when you could just like not be rich but still buy some paradise estate in Colorado.
We all know that's how it went down.
Oh my God. All right.
So it's like beautiful. The pictures are super gorgeous.
Yeah.
And he starts going to work. He ends up being a really super talented welder. Mm-hmm. So he starts working on mufflers. He works in a muffler shop and he ends up eventually opening his own shops.
So this guy's living the life.
Yeah, basically. And he did super well financially. He's the self-made man. He characterizes himself as someone with a champagne income and a beer taste, which is how you get ahead in life.
All right.
And in keeping with that, Marv was also hella into snowmobiling.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the reasons probably why you'd live in a place like that.
Yeah, totally. And he snowmobiled all the time. That was his thing. He bought his girlfriend a snowmobile so they could go together. He was a part of this thing called the Thursday Crew. So every Thursday, a bunch of middle-aged dudes, like 40 to 50-year-old guys would snowmobile together.
So they were in a snowmobile gang.
Yes, and they loved Marv. They were like crazy about him. He's a welder, right? And he would weld together like these different inventions, like a little metal sort of contraption that was like a glove warmer. And
like customizing their snowmobiles.
Yeah, and like so he would have a glove warmer. He invented a grill he invented these things that they called Marv bumpers that you can attach to the outside of your snowmobile so you can run over small trees.
That is awesome. Are you kidding me?
He's like really into it.
Wait, I'm sorry. What year is this?
This is like early 90s.
Oh, wow. So they're just high on the hog.
Yeah.
This is the real deal.
It's good life. Good
Okay.
life. Early 90s, late 80s. So in 1992, Marv Heemeyer went to nearby Granby, Colorado. It's a small town kind of just close to him, I think maybe 15 minutes away. And he bought a property at auction for $42,000 to open Mountain View Muffler Shop. And the 3,000 square foot building with the old cement mixer for a sewage tank and the 2 acres that surrounded it would be the epicenter of small town drama for the next 12 years.
Oh, damn. You're getting good at this, Muriel.
I'm just trying to tease you. I want you to be like hella into it.
Oh my God. I can't quite wrap my mind around this cement mixer sewage container.
I guess he used it as a sewage tank.
Yeah, he just put his poop in there.
I don't know. Well, I'll explain it.
Yeah,
I'll explain it.
I'm sure you will, little Miss Researcher.
It's actually very critical to this story. Okay, so this is the drama.
Uh-huh.
There are 2 very distinct sides to this story. So according to Marvin Heemeyer, the small town of Granby was run by this good old boys club who hated outsiders and conspired to ruin his business and his life. So the richest family in town controlled the politics in Granby. And according to Marv, they forced favorable outcomes for their close allies while like destroying the prospects of outsiders. And it sort of locked Marv into a David and Goliath situation where Marv was pitted against this corrupt local government. Right. So that's Marv's perspective of what happened. And then on the other hand, the bewildered people of Granby found Marv to be sort of a crazy ass. So those are the 2 kind of sides. And I think the truth might lie somewhere in between. I don't know if we really know.
Well, that's the tricky nature of truth, you know?
Okay. But I'm going to try my best to represent both sides. So we're not going to try to get locked into this argument. This is a really interesting case because we've covered something similar to this earlier in this season.
Yeah.
That was Tony Kuritz's.
Right.
And these kind of guys on a rampage, Dog Day Afternoon guys, end up being a lot of the times held in this esteem by anti-government groups and stuff like this. So actually when you Google Marvin Heemeyer, you get men's rights activist posts and blogs and like he had a lot of people who are super behind him.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because when you read things about him, they're kind of polarized. They're skewed really heavily one way and the other.
Right.
So it's, I don't know, I just thought it to be kind of interesting. So we're going to try our best to be like as objective as we can.
Great.
Well, that's my job. You can have an opinion.
Yeah, I might go crazy.
You're the bad boy. You don't have any.
I just want to join the snowmobile gang. I've never been on a snowmobile, and boy, do I want to be on one right now. Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
So this is Marvin's side. So Marvin Heemeyer actually recorded about 6 hours of cassette tapes about his life and what led to the Killdozer event. And inside that, he has a lot of personal philosophy and he talks about his relationship with God and all different kinds of things like that. So we actually have that as a resource. So we really have a good sense of how he felt about the whole situation and lots of quotes and stuff. So when I'm reading about his perspective, I'm literally using language that he used. Just so you know, I'm not totally editorializing this.
All of a sudden you just come out with like really weird early 90s slang.
It's more about the way that God talks to him and what God tells him to do, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So according to Marv, he went to Granby to go to a property auction. It was like a foreclosure auction. There were a bunch of properties in Granby that they were auctioning off, right? Yeah. So at the auction, on the day he won his Granby property for $42,000, he was confronted by this angry townsperson named Cody Dochev. And Cody's this small, super fiery guy with a famous temper. He's also a really well-loved local in Granby, and he's the founder of the Dochev Legacy Mountain Park Concrete. So he's been around forever, and he's a big love guy.
He's built the town with his concrete company.
Kind of. I mean, he has a concrete company.
Okay. All right.
So Cody had actually previously owned the property, and he was trying to buy it back at auction. So he had a friend who was with him who had the money to bid on the property. But it's a little kind of hard to parse out, but essentially the friend wasn't really going to go higher than about $35,000. So the friend bids $35,000 and Marv outbids him. He bids $42,000 and wins the property. So according to Marv, what happens is after the auction, kind of while everybody in the town is still around in this big auction hall, Cody Dochev came up to him and started screaming at him. And he was like, you got this property, like berating him. And everyone at the auction was watching this confrontation happen and surprised at this behavior.
Yeah, I mean, that just seems like he's being like a spoiled brat because he lost the auction.
Right. According to Marv, everyone was super shocked. Cody's way out of line. And Marv considered Cody a, quote, fucking asshole. So after the auction closes, Cody attempts to purchase the land from Marv a bunch of times. But according to Marv, Cody would just offer him these insultingly low prices on the property. So Marv ended up keeping the property and just goes ahead with opening Mountain View Muffler, right? His business. Now, separate from the whole purchase of the building, there's this other issue with the property, and that's the cement mixer he was using to hold all his poop from the property, right? The property that Marv had bought had no running water and had this concrete mixer basically as a sewage tank. And it's a code violation. It's a code violation in the city of Granby to have any building that's close enough to a sewer main to not have sewage. So because it's a really rural town, if the building was way out,
they're like, go ahead, just poop in the cement mixer.
Right, that's
like,
fine.
We'll give you a pass. That's fine.
Exactly. But if you're in the middle of town, they don't want people using random things for like sewage tanks, right? Which I think makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So the city requested that Marv run a line out to the town's sewer main to connect. And at first, Marv's like fine with this, but he soon finds out the closest sewer main is several hundred feet away from his business. And in order for him to hook up to that, he would have to build a really long service line. And that would cost him upwards of $80,000.
Oh, shit.
So it was really expensive. I mean, it's almost twice the price of the property that he bought.
He should have looked into that before he's just out here bidding on stuff at auctions and getting into fights with people.
I kind of agree. I mean, I think that it feels really exorbitant, and I can understand somebody's perspective of being like, that's the overreach of the government.
Yeah.
But like, we come from a place, where your grandma lives, where there are properties that have water rights to different wells, and the properties that are the cheapest are the ones that don't have access to water.
Right.
When you're going and buying a house and you see something that's too good to be true, it generally means you can't hook up to water.
Yeah, it's like you're going to be pooping in concrete and drinking whatever water the blackberry leaves collect.
Right, exactly. It's like, that is something that was listed and probably why the property was so cheap. Right. But whatever. I get why people are mad about that, but it's also like, you probably should have figured that out.
Yeah, you should. Yeah.
But, it is a huge amount of money. And Marv freaks out and he just flat out refuses to do it. And this is when he starts to say, this is the action of the good old boys. So Marv felt that Cody Dochev and other influential families in Granby, like the Thompsons of Thompson Excavation,
jerks,
were working together to get revenge on Marv for outbidding the well-liked Cody Dochev, right? So it's a small town, and it is true that the wealthiest family, the patriarch of that family was the mayor at the time, and his son was serving on like the sewage district board. So there was definitely connection to this family, although that family didn't really know Marvin at all. But regardless, Marv felt the politically well-connected families were basically forcing him to pay for the sewage line to be malicious. So Marv just kept doing his thing with this cement mixer toilet, and time marches on.
Is he in business? Is he like making mufflers? And
Yeah, he's repairing mufflers. He does really good welding. And the town he had a reputation for being a great welder.
Yeah.
People thought he did very good work. So again, this is all Marvin's side of the story. So eventually Dochev gives up on purchasing Marvin's land, and coincidentally the city then spot zoned an area nearby and deeming it kind of zoned for Cody's business needs. So Cody just ends up buying the property next door to Marv instead of buying Marv's property.
Oh, great.
And he's intending to build a concrete batch plant for his Mountain Park Concrete Company. And in 1999, Cody Dochev goes to the city for approval to build the batch plant. And Marv is the face of the public opposition to it. And the city holds these big public hearings to debate the building of the batch plant in town. And because Dick Thompson of Thompson Excavations was the mayor of Granby at the time.
Jerks.
Another local who's also like in on the boys club, Dick Brody, was acting mayor. Because Dick Thompson had a conflict of interest regarding the case. I guess Cody Dochev was leasing land from the Thompsons at the time, so they didn't want to get involved with Cody Dochev's business dealings.
It already sounds like the nature of the game is conflict of interest.
Yeah, right? And then you can kind of start to see how everything's interconnected, kind of like the movie Chinatown, right? Great. So just remember, cool it, Jake, it's Chinatown, or whatever he says.
Yeah, cool it, Marv, it's Granby.
Yeah, exactly. So during the public hearings, there was this super fierce debate and a packed house with Cody Dochev losing his temper at every turn. He felt like he should be able to build this batch plant, and he can't understand the opposition to it. He's known for like jumping up on his chair and screaming at these meetings. And the acting mayor and the people on the town board and Cody Dochev are all arguing that the batch plant would drive traffic into the town and create jobs and raise property values. Marv, on the other hand, was arguing that the cement plant would hurt his business. He said there'd be dust in the air, tons of noise, excess traffic. It could compromise the water supply, and that the same thing would happen to the surrounding neighborhood. He's like, I don't want my business to be next to a cement batch plant because of all these kind of environmental concerns. And all those concerns relate to you. This is a small town. So like they're going to be right next to your house.
Also, you're saying batch plant. Is it one of these big concrete things that have like the big things that go into the sky? It's like a big, huge plant. I don't know. I'm just inventing what this is in my brain. I've seen them. There's one actually in our neighborhood.
It's kind of like that as far as I know, but it's indoors. So it's not outdoors. They would have a giant warehouse where they'd be mixing big batches of cement. I believe that's what they're doing. So It's not the same as the fully outdoor giant ones that you see. It's more of like a contained batch plant. But so that is something to keep in mind.
Okay.
So after several meetings and this super hot-blooded debate, the town ultimately approves the batch plant. And they allow Cody to come in and begin construction with a few provisions that are kind of based on what they figured out during the town meetings. So at the final meeting, after announcing the city's intention to approve the plant, Marv stands up and he vows to fight Cody Dochev every step of the way. Right? So Marv lawyers up and he files a lawsuit against the Dochevs and the city of Granby about this construction. Yeah. He's like, it's a massive conspiracy. It's illegal that they even spot zoned this area. We should have been able to, reject that proposal. He's super mad about the whole thing and feels like it's really like a lot of backdoor politics.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, the town starts cracking down on Marv for the sewer stuff. So the Granby Municipal Court found him in violation of city code, which he was, and said that he couldn't use his property for anything or sell it until he hooked up to the water and sewer line, or the person who was purchasing the property had full intentions of hooking up. So it's like, you can't even sell it unless they have written intentions of hooking up to the sewer line.
I get it. That's okay. All right. There's just too much poop in this damn cement container.
But the problem is, at this point, Cody Dochev had bought the neighboring property. So now Marv has to get an easement from him to lay down his sewer line because it goes straight through Cody's property.
Oh, I was wondering that. So is the stupid concrete plant going to have to also build something out to the main sewer line?
Yeah, and they did. They did it because that's just how to come up to code. That's a part of their budget.
But Marv has to then connect to theirs.
Or to connect to the main. And either way, he has to ask permission. So he goes and he asks Cody to give the easement. And according to Marv, Cody just says, no, I'm not going to give you permission. Yeah. And this town wouldn't force Cody to give the easement because they consider it a civil matter. So at this point, Marv's property is useless because no one can set up a connection to the sewer main without going through Cody's property.
Killdozer, here it comes. The tension is building. Drum, drum, drum. Okay.
I love your singing this episode. It's very funny.
I can't believe that you're doing such an enthusiastic job talking about zoning permits and property laws. Like, we're just dumb apartment city dwellers. We know nothing of this.
I'm trying my hardest. It's I'm like, my brain is like, oh my God, what are these words? All right. So Marv can't get the easement. Cody won, ha ha ha, I'm the king of the world. And now the town is starting to fine Marvin $100 a day for running a business without water and sewage. So then they start levying fines against him. So, Marvin is just losing it. Mm-hmm. The vice has been tightened. He's in this situation. So he writes this check to cover the fines. And in the memo line, he writes, quote, to the cowards and liars department. So then the town sent the check back saying it was written incorrectly. And Marv just loses his shit. He goes down to the town hall. He gets into this fat argument with Deb, the town clerk. And, at the end of all of this, Marv ends up spending upwards of $150,000 on legal fees on this $42,000 piece of property. And ultimately, Marv's lawsuits were all dismissed, and his attorney refused to file any appeals because he feels like the case is groundless. So he spent all of that money and there's nothing to show for it, and he has no attorney to file appeals. I can't get over this. In the early 90s, he gets out of the Air Force, he buys this beautiful property, he's like, I'm just gonna start a little business. He starts a little business and has $150,000 to fight legal fees. Yeah.
That is crazy. So he's rich. I just can't, in my brain, that doesn't work anymore.
I know. Well, it's a different world now.
Oh my God.
So one night, Marv is sitting on his deck in his hot tub, crying and drinking beer when he realizes that God wanted him to build a Killdozer.
Ooh.
So in summer 2002, Marv went to California to bid on a Komatsu D355 bulldozer. So that's like a really big bulldozer. It's 30 tons. It's big.
What does that compare to?
Here's the deal. If you Google it,
yeah,
nobody says shit about how I can't figure it out. I don't know. And I tried to figure it out because that question is not something that people who Google bulldozers would ask because they already know.
They're like, is it like half of a garbage truck?
Right. Well, because when you buy a car, it's like you can buy a car and not know anything about cars. So there's websites everywhere that are like, this is what this car is versus this car, and comparing the features. If you Google Komatsu D355 bulldozers, it's just for people who are in the market to buy a bulldozer. And so they already know what the specs are. You know what I mean? Even the specs don't make any sense to me, but it's massive. It's
it's one of the big ones.
It's a very big bulldozer.
Okay. So it's definitely way bigger than an SUV, probably not as big as like an ambulance, or maybe it is the size
Oh
of
no,
an
way
ambulance.
bigger than it. It's big.
Oh.
I think it's like maybe half the size of a fire truck. It's really big. And it does a ton of damage and couldn't be stopped by any other of the dozers they had in town. So I'm just assuming it's just a very big
so he
dozer.
bought the Mamma Jamma.
He bought the Mamma Jamma.
Man, a lot of things can go through a man's brain when he's drinking beer and crying in a hot tub. And I guess I understand the leap from I'm good at snowmobiles to let me get a bulldozer. Like, there is something about that is logical, but there is also something otherworldly. I won't say godly about it, but that's a big leap. That was a spiritual experience, whether it was from the dark forces or the good forces. I guess we'll find out.
Right. So everyone in the town watches him truck this bulldozer in, and they all remember it as, man, that's a big dozer.
Yeah.
What in the heck is he going to do with that thing? So he parks it in the driveway of the muffler shop, just facing Mountain Park concrete. And he slaps a for sale sign on it and leaves it there. And it sits there facing the concrete plant all winter. Now, because the city had prohibited him from operating his muffler shop without a sewage hookup, Marv just closed the business and he put everything up for auction, including the bulldozer. So he tried to get $33,000 for the dozer and $450,000 for the property. And no one in town bought either. So he took that as a super solid sign that God didn't want him to walk away from the Killdozer idea. That was like, you got this, buddy. Nobody wants to buy the Killdozer.
Right. And it's just aimed at his enemy.
Right.
He's like, if God didn't want me to hit the gas pedal, someone would have got this and reversed this out of here.
Exactly.
I have a question. Is he talking about God anywhere else in his life or on these recordings? He's
super, he's pretty classic in his like patriotism and God and Christianity that's all kind of mixed together. So he's a strong patriot, a Christian. He believes that God has a path for him. His philosophy is really rooted in, I think, meritocracy, right? Like the idea that you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're a self-made man. Capitalism means a fair playing field.
Right.
Everyone should have a chance, and so if you violate that fair playing field, then all bets are off and it's anarchy. So his feeling is like he's morally justified because his connection with God and Christianity and that connection with the righteousness of capitalism.
I get it. So it makes sense that the message from God would come in a hot tub while drinking beer and looking out over his beautiful property.
Right. And that the message from God is directly linked to like property rights and money and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I have a pretty clear idea of his spiritual compass.
Yeah, right. So in the fall of 2003, Marv sold his property to a man named Travis Busey of the Granby Trash Company for $400,000, which is a huge windfall.
What?
And he doesn't have any kids. He's not married. So like he's a single dude with almost $500,000 in the early 2000s, and he's got all of his properties paid off. So it's pretty cool.
Wait,
What?
I'm sorry. He sold his house or his
Muffler shop.
He sold for $400,000?
That property. Yeah. And that's the one thing about this. For the most part, I tend to think that the side of the town is more convincing. But that's the one part of it that the people who are on the side of the town don't really address, is that it seems like that property was actually worth a lot, and he got it at auction for very, very little.
Yeah.
It had appreciated over 10 years, and the town had changed by then.
Sure.
But the idea that it went from $42,000 to $400,000 means that his requests for these high numbers for his property from Cody Dochev weren't so like crazy.
Right.
So I do think that that's the one thing that has my spidey senses tingling. But that was what they valued the property as.
Damn, all right.
So he sold it for $400,000, and within 24 hours, Travis had the water and sewer hooked up to the property. So it just took like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So that just left Marv with the dozer. So Marvin did what any responsible man would do, and he rented the property's garage from Travis just to store the dozer. It was there anyway. Sounds great. Now, the Komatsu was 2 inches shorter than the height of the entrance to the garage, and 1 inch narrower than the entrance. So it just barely fit inside the garage.
Yeah.
Which was also, wait for it, a sign from God that the dozer was here to stay. Because it was like, maybe it wouldn't fit, and it totally fit. So Marv built a sleeping area in the garage so he could work 24/7 on converting the Komatsu into the Killdozer while he watched Vin Diesel movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Which I just love that this most of this information comes from this great documentary we'll talk about at the end. But that was just such a great detail. They were like, oh man, he loves Vin Diesel. So this right now, this next portion is the town's version of events. Okay. So we're going to go through what they viewed this whole debacle to be about.
I'm into it.
So first off, the town of Granby was only about 1,500 people strong. So it's a very small town. And all of these like quote unquote political positions, like, you know, the town board and acting mayor and all that kind of stuff were all unpaid elected volunteer positions. So it wasn't like there was a bunch of money in these boys club positions. I mean, there's some influence because obviously they're zoning things and telling people what they can and can't do.
But who the hell else is going to do them? There's only 1,500 people.
That's what they say. It's basically viewed as the town as community service work. So it's like the people who do these jobs are kind of like, nobody else is going to do it. We're going to do this thing. The Thompson family are millionaires and they do have influence on the town. They own tons of land in the area and they lease it out. But other than Dick Thompson being the mayor and his son, Ron Thompson, being the vice president of the board of the sewer district, they actually never had any direct dealings with Marv. Marv didn't lease any of their properties. Marv didn't hire their company to do anything. Like they did not know each other.
Yeah. And
the whole keeping your building up to code regarding water and sewage was something that literally everyone in the town had to comply with. And that's their position. They were just like, I mean, you can say it's politics, but they weren't singling him out as being like the only person who had to comply. They're like, you have a building in the middle of town. You can't keep your sewage in an old concrete mixer because if that breaks or leaks, that's super gross, you know?
It's absolutely probably the grossest thing that could happen to a small town is that everyone's poop gets out of control.
Right.
They're like, we just got to do this one part right.
Did we learn anything from the Dark Ages? There is one thing that I do want to talk about in terms of the city's perspective. I did find it super hard to find anything about the spot zoning the city did to accommodate Cody Docheff's purchase of the property adjacent to Marv's. And anyone who's on the side of the city doesn't mention it. They just say, oh yeah, we spot zone this place. And like I said, like we're from the city. We don't know very much about the politics of small towns. I assume zoning is just zoning. It changes all the time. They're changed zoning in my neighborhood all the time and like proposed land use, whatever. So I assume like that's kind of a fluid thing, but it seemed really important to Marvin Heemeyer and that story. He felt like that was a huge sign that there was a conspiracy going on to help Cody and hinder him.
Yeah.
But whenever the people on the side of the town talk, they never mention anything about the spot zoning stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what spot zoning is.
It's just kind of, from what I understand, it's just to go in and change the zoning of a particular area.
Oh, of a spot.
Right. So instead of changing the zoning for the whole town, they're like, we're going to change the zoning for this area to make it possible to use for commercial use.
Sure.
So it used to be maybe zoned for residential, and now we're going to rezone this particular area for commercial or mixed commercial use.
I mean, it doesn't sound crazy to me that they would be like, yeah, how about next to the muffler shop they make concrete?
Right.
Like that seems kind of in the realm of it makes sense. Like people get really upset if like legal weed shops are close to schools or that kind of stuff, you know.
But those things don't seem too odd. I think that the only kind of this is Chinatown sort of thing is that Cody wanted to buy that property and Marv was not allowing him to do it in the way he wanted to. So all of a sudden now there's like brand new property available for Cody, who happens to be connected to the Thompsons and a well-liked person in the area.
Right.
Because remember, Marvin lived in Grand Lake, right? So even though it was very close to Granby, he was still considered an outsider. You know, he's a guy from another city coming in, whereas Cody is a local.
Yeah.
which,
It's like, you guys are neighbors.
right.
We don't want these outsiders coming in. It's like, well, then what are you talking
They're
about?
all pretty similar. It's a very homogenous area.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, that's the only part that made me feel kind of Chinatowny about the whole thing. Like, that's the only thing that felt a little conspiracy theory. I could see Marvin's perspective just because they seem to be burying that information or not including it in the narrative.
Right.
All right, let's keep going. So the town's version of events is obviously a little different. Some of this is he said, she said stuff, and then other things are easily verifiable with documents and photographs. But that's kind of it's a mixture of both.
Sure.
So first off, the auction. So apparently Cody Dochev says he never spoke to Marvin Heemeyer at the auction. There was no confrontation. There was no yelling. He said that he never even met Marvin until way later.
What?
And no one who was interviewed who attended the auction remembers this confrontation. But
Marv's story is it was like a big public thing and everyone witnessed it.
Cody was like, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to buy the property. I was there with my friend. He and his friend actually go to like foreclosure auctions a lot together, and they sometimes buy and they sometimes don't, and they usually keep a budget, I think, of under 50,000 is what I heard. So from their perspective, they weren't there to buy this property in particular. They were just going to see if they could get it cheap. Now, given the fact that it's worth so much money 10 years later, that seems odd to me that they're like, yeah, we don't care.
Right.
It's like Cody used to own that property. It was foreclosed on. He's trying to get it back. And the guy who bought it for $42,000 is trying to get way more money for it from him. So
totally.
Doesn't that seem a little odd? But anyway, they say that confrontation never happened, which I kind of get. But then they also say like, and we didn't even care about the property.
We were just waltzing by on our normal auction routine.
Right. So according to Cody, after the auction, he actually contacted Marv and offered to buy the property off of him. And they would agree on a price and shake on it. And then Marvin would back out. So basically, the first amount they agreed on was $250,000 for their property, which is a lot.
Hell
right?
Yeah, that's a huge come up.
And Cody was like, great, we've got it. Let's shake on it. I'll buy it for $250,000. Cody said that he then went to talk to some people on the town board about the zoning, and they sort of informally approved the construction of the badge plan on the property. So before they even had the hearings, they were kind of like, yeah, I think that would be good for the town. I think if you purchase that property, we're super amenable to you building this badge plan.
Yeah.
Marvin somehow found out about that and now felt that the property was worth a lot more, knowing that for sure this thing would be approved. So then he said, I want at least $375,000 for this property. And Cody agreed to that price. After they agreed on that price, Marvin went even higher. So ultimately, from what I can tell, Marvin wanted a deal that would have amounted to close to $1 million. He wanted to sell the property to Cody for a certain amount, and then he wanted to have Cody build him a state-of-the-art muffler shop on the property. And with the building cost and the cost of the property and all this stuff, they said that it would amount to about $1 million for this property.
How much money is in concrete making?
Well,
do they just expect this guy to be just turning out millions of dollars worth of concrete?
Whatever happened, the Dochefs are super baffled and they back out of the deal. They're just basically like, whatever he wants, we've kind of accommodated. But then he comes back with requests that are just so absurd that it's almost like he was forcing us to say no. They just kind of didn't feel like it was in good faith, the negotiations. He just seemed really mad and unreasonable.
So is any of this backed up with documents and pictures like you were saying, or is this still in the he said, she said realm?
None of the deals that Cody said they reached were in a contract or anything. They were all verbal agreements. So it's in the he said, she said realm, but it's pretty consistently reported. So there are several articles. Again, though, that comes from Cody's perspective. But
articles like in the paper?
Yeah. So there's lots of papers that have covered this thing, and then it's kind of widely reported that those were the ballpark numbers. I tend to believe them because I think that they were pretty close to what ultimately Marvin sold the property for, so they're right around there.
Right.
And so he's saying, yeah, I offered him really close to the value of the property at the time.
Yeah.
And I think once they built the batch plant, it actually made his property value increase. So that's probably why he was even able to get more, is because Cody built the batch plant. The idea is that the money that Cody's throwing around, those numbers seem pretty reasonable to me. And that's part of his argument, was like, they weren't these crazy lowball numbers. I said I would buy it for $375,000, which was really close to what he ultimately ended up selling it for after the batch plant was made, built. So that's why I tend to believe it, because it just seems reasonable. And Cody's and the dough chef's position was just like, I think this is reasonable. I'll tell you exactly what we offered.
Yeah.
And exactly what he rejected. And I always felt it was reasonable. And I don't know why he's so mad at me.
So what makes this guy have a famous temper around town?
People say, this is what they said in the documentary, he's Hungarian and he doesn't take no shit. Like, he tells it like it is. I don't know. So it's like, people really like him, but he's blunt. And if he thinks something's unreasonable, then he says it's unreasonable. So he's just kind of like, why? Why are you acting like this?
Right. So, and there wasn't other corroborating stories of him confronting Marv, but there are public versions of him screaming about.
And jumping on chairs, which is what Marvin said he did at the auction too.
Okay.
So
I'm just going to go ahead and guess that no matter how much you're like, yeah, we shook on it and blah, 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 that it wasn't like the most chill negotiating.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure they both had a part to play, but I think that it makes sense. The numbers that Cody's throwing out make sense to me. I don't think he's lying about that.
Yeah.
But, whatever.
Wait, aren't some of your crazy ass ancestors on your white side Hungarian?
We're Austrian.
Oh, okay.
I think we are Austrian and like royalty also.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I Googled it the other day.
We got to get on one of those 23andMe's, which is the one that proves that you're royalty and therefore you get some gems shipped in from Austria. Let's sign up for one of those.
I don't think that's the way it goes. I think that my families were exiled and like executed or something. I don't know if that's really still happening. So, continuing on with our story, when Marv needed the easement on the Dochev property for a sewer hookup, the Dochev said they would grant Marv the easement if he dropped the now clearly frivolous lawsuit. So they said, no problem, we'll totally give you the easement, but you have to drop the lawsuit against us. And after the lawsuit was rejected and he never filed an appeal, the Dochefs said they would have given him access to their sewer line, but basically Marv just totally wouldn't speak to them. So Marv never really asked to be hooked up to any of the sewer stuff after the lawsuit failed. He just basically hermited crabbed himself into his shop.
Just huddled away, pooping in his cement mixer.
Right. They were just like, we'll totally hook you up, dude, as long as you stop acting like a nutball. And he's like, actually, no. And from the town's perspective also, there's just a lot of stuff that was just different, right? Like in the town meetings, the town was actually really impressed with the way that Marv's opposition helped them come up with a more beneficial relationship with the Dochef's batch plant. There's a guy named Casey Farrell who Marv called a barbarian and later bulldozed his family's business to the ground.
Oh, no.
He was a transplant like Marv, and he had moved to the area around the same time. So he wasn't even like a born and bred local also. He was a transplant. This guy, Casey Farrell, he served on the town board at the time all this went down. And later, he said Marv made all these excellent points regarding the environmental impact of the batch plant. And he helped the board develop a series of provisions that Dochev was totally fine with complying with. And he said he actually was really grateful for Marv for his participation in the hearings. It essentially helped them mitigate a bunch of stuff that they didn't even consider when they were ready to approve the batch plant.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he was like, yeah, we were all kind of
we love this guy. He makes the best mufflers in Colorado.
Well, kind of. And that his participation in the hearing was like civil service. He went in and he helped them get a better deal. He helped the people get a better deal. So they definitely were happy with the way the whole thing turned out. It wasn't like the whole town was like, we don't want to have these hearings. He's stretching this out forever.
Right.
Like at the end of it, they were all thinking, I'm glad we did that.
Totally.
And as for the Thompsons, Dick Thompson's sons, Larry and Gary, just straight up didn't get it at all. They did not understand why Marv was so mad at them. So they are millionaires, but they are not fancy. They are not fancy people. They're overall wearing, excavation driving, like straight up dudes. They're born and raised in Granby.
Yeah, they're like champagne income, moonshine taste.
Right, exactly. You know, and they're really similar. And that's what they say too about Marvin and Cody, is they're both self-made men who kind of came up and did well and lived in Granby and were just trying to make a living.
It's like the town is big enough for the both of us. This is literally the wilderness.
Well, also it's like muffler guy, excavation guy, cement guy. Like you're not even in competition with each other.
Yeah, right. And they're also not like then the Wall Street banker guy,
right,
and the weird hippie commune or something.
Right, they're all like blue collar workers who did really well for themselves in this time in America where that was super possible, you know, and they're small business owners, you know, they share a lot in common. So these guys are not fancy dudes. They even operate all the machinery themselves in the excavation. They don't really have very many employees. So they run the company themselves. The millionaires run the machines.
Right.
And before Marv unleashed the Killdozer on Granby, they only had one real interaction with him. They say in 2003, the Thompson brothers were excavating a foundation for a house that was below Marvin's property, and Marvin drove down to confront them. And he pulls Larry Thompson aside and he says, in 1992, your brother Ron financially ruined me for the rest of my life for making me bring my building up to code. And then he says he wants $300,000 from the Thompsons in restitution.
Damn.
And Larry just said, no. Like, who are you?
You're just trying to like bully me.
Right.
Like pocket check me on the construction site.
Right. And so according to Larry, Marv threatened them and he just drove away. And Larry and Gary were just like, what is up with that guy? Marv claims that after their conversation, as he was driving away, Larry screamed, "You can suck my dick," as he drove away. And that's what confirmed to Marv that Larry and Gary knew about the conspiracy to ruin his life.
It was when he said "suck my dick" that God told me that they're definitely in on the inside job.
Almost verbatim what his perspective is. And the Thompson brothers, for their part, they love making die-cast toy model like cars. They collect a few vintage fire trucks, and they say they did not tell Marvin Heemeyer to suck their dick. It didn't happen. And there's smaller things too, like Deb, the town clerk. You remember the lady that Marv yelled at about the check?
Right. I was thinking about her.
Right. It said to the cowards and traitors in the memo, right?
Right.
She says he just literally wrote the amount wrong, so she couldn't cash it. And then there's a picture of the check, and he wrote the amount wrong. It was different than the number amount that he had written in, and that's why she sent it back, because he had just messed up the check. And she said Marvin busted into her office and accused her of talking shit about him at the bank.
Yeah.
And she was just like, I literally don't care about him. Like, why would I talk to anybody at the bank about him? Like, I don't even know who this guy is.
It just seems like this guy just loves confrontation. He loves having enemies.
There's a little bit of a picture that gets painted where like some of the things that have pictures that you can back up.
Yeah.
Illustrate the type of behavior that other people who don't have that same evidence say he exhibited. You know what I mean? Like there's very similar patterns. Like screaming, "You can suck my dick" does not sound like the Larry and Gary, based on a lot of their interactions with people.
Yeah.
It sounds very Marvin Heemeyer.
Yeah, right.
He also had a vendetta against this guy, Patrick Brower, and he worked at the local paper. I think he was either an editor or reporter. But the local paper is the Sky High News. And Marvin really was like, this guy hates me. He'd never do a story about me in the paper. He's blocking me from being able to, introduce myself to the locals and all this kind of stuff. And at one point, Marvin actually confronted Brower, and he was so upset with Brower that Brower gave him a half-page $200 ad for free. He was like, "I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding. Here's the ad. That ad exists." Yeah. He's like, I gave him this ad. And he says, not only did I collaborate with Marv on editorials about the batch plant construction, but he actually would go down to the muffler shop to see if Marv wanted to buy advertising or do a story in the paper. And he's like, Marv was literally never there. He was always out snowboarding or snowmobiling.
Yeah, right. He's with the Snow Bros.
Which I feel like is throwing a little shade. But he was like, yeah, I tried to contact this guy and he just doesn't work. I don't know what he does.
Yeah, right. Weird.
So all of that stuff culminates into the rampage.
Okay.
So that's how we get to the fall of 2003 and the construction of the Killdozer. Now, remember, right? Marv is a master welder. And, you know, he spent his free time making Marv bumpers so people could run over trees and snowmobiles. So he really knew his stuff.
Yeah, he was preparing for the big leagues.
He basically fortified this bulldozer with these concrete-filled steel panels. So he rigged up a bunch of security cameras to monitors and then put them in his sleeping shack so he could see when everyone from the garbage company and the batch plant left the property to go home for the night. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as the coast is clear, he would do all of his work at night. And he built basically like this shell around the bulldozer that was essentially a tank with concrete filled steel slabs that he welded to the frame.
Do you have a picture? Can I see it?
Yeah, here.
Holy crap. It looks like a building. It looks like I don't know Star Wars, but you know those big things that have the long legs?
Yeah.
It looks like that, but instead of it being up on legs, it's on a tank.
I mean, it essentially looks like a tank, but if you notice, there's also no windows.
Yeah.
It's all just straight slabs of concrete.
There's also no spikes or things. I thought maybe there would be some more like kind of protruding missile options, but it's not
just
that.
Hold
kind
on
of
to your
thing.
ass. Okay. But he's building this thing, right? And it's massive.
Right.
But he was amazed. He never got caught. Nobody confronted him. Nobody was like, why are you living in the garage now?
Right. You're rich. You just made 10 times what you spent on this property, and you have a hot tub that overlooks a valley or whatever.
It like should have been some sort of thing that people were like, what's Marv doing in that shed?
That's hilarious. I mean? The whole time, all he wants is like, quote unquote, to be left alone and just to be able to do his own thing. And as soon as he actually goes off and does his own thing, he's like, why is no one paying attention to me?
No, he was like, this is proof that I'm doing God's work because no one's messing with me. Like at one point, Travis from the garbage company who had bought the property, he came in for an inspection for insurance purposes. So we had all these insurance guys come in. They came in and Marv told them the Killdozer was a project he was working on with a professor. And it was like a engine cooling system for bulldozers. And everybody...
It's literally a concrete cube of a thing.
They saw it and they all believed him. And he's on his tapes just going like, I can't believe I didn't get caught.
Yeah. Well, I guess it does say that in the Bible. Like if you get away with it, it means God wanted you to do it.
So he feels like he's super on track. And then, you know, winter hits and the winter of 2003 hits and God tells him, listen, take the winter off of the Killdozer because I want you to go snowmobiling and just blow off some steam. So he took a break from the Killdozer and he went and snowmobiled for the whole winter season. So he comes back from snowmobiling and he's getting set up for his Killdozer thing, right? And we kind of touched on this, but this is definitely a time in which he was recording a lot for his cassette tape manifesto and really talking about his philosophy is that he's a patriot and a capitalist, you know, and what he really focused on was that it's supposed to be a level playing field. And if the playing field's not level, it gives him license to do whatever he wants.
That's a very poetic thing. A metaphor, leveling, bulldozing.
You're so smart.
I'm so smart.
So according to his manifesto and his hit list, his beef in particular was with the Thompsons, the Dochefs, the guy from the newspaper, and anyone who sat on the Granby Town Board or the Granby Planning Commission. So those were all of his beefs. And on the morning of June 4th, 2004, he shaved his head and busted straight out of the walls of his rented garage in the Killdozer.
Oh, he went straight taxi driver on him.
Yeah, and he like just splintered this garage, right? Like you saw, it's totally encased in reinforced steel, basically a tank. There's no visible entry points, no windows. It's just this massive steel box with a dozer attachment.
Yeah.
The first thing Marv did was head across the street to Dochef's batch plant to wreck shop. So Cody, right, he's a small dude. At this point, he's in his mid-60s.
Yeah.
He runs out and he starts shooting the Killdozer with a pistol.
Fuck
He's
yeah.
like, they're just blasting and nothing happens. The bullets are just bouncing off. Like it doesn't even dent the steel.
Right.
So then they run and he gets some of his guys and they get all these poles and they try to like jam the poles in the tracks.
Do they know what's happening? Do they know it's Marvin there? Or are they
Nobody
like,
knows what's happening. It was like 0 to 100 and like immediately. Like it was... He busts out, goes across the street, and just starts destroying this property. So people are calling 911, and they're saying, I think there's a bulldozer. They're destroying our buildings. You know, like the 911 calls. Everyone is just totally confused about what's going on. But Cody springs to action immediately.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's on these bulldozer treads, right? So it
Yeah.
moves like a tank. So they get these steel poles and they try to jam them into the treads and they're just snapping off and like flying off.
Damn.
So Cody's badass tried climbing up onto the Killdozer, but he couldn't climb on top because Marv had greased up the outside of the Killdozer.
Oh, man.
It was like super greasy. So he fell off. So after he tried shooting the Killdozer with a pistol and climbing on top of it, 60-something-year-old Cody runs back into his shed, comes out riding this smaller front-end loader that he had on his lot, which is like a little bulldozer. And so he attacks the Killdozer with the front-end loader, and he hits it so hard that Cody smacks his head against the windshield and gets knocked the F out.
Oh, damn.
So
Bumper cars style.
He's passed out in this front-end loader while the Killdozer is just like destroying stuff. And while Cody is sitting passed out in the front loader, everyone makes another discovery about the Killdozer. It had guns.
Oh,
So a massive
fuck.
50 caliber automatic rifle pokes through a hole in a metal plate, one of the metal plates, and just opens fire on the front loader. So the bullets shoot up the bucket of the front loader. He shoots like 9 times or something. But Cody is able to wake up and escape, so he doesn't get shot. He survives.
That's good.
At this point, the cops show up to see the Killdozer just massacring the batch plant. It's just destroying everything. And
How fast can it go?
not that fast. That's definitely a part of this.
Okay, all right,
So
yeah.
like Cody runs out and he's like, the cops are just like, what is happening? Right.
Yeah.
And Cody just runs out screaming and he's like, it's Heemeyer. And he's controlling it remotely from the hills. And the cops are just, what is going on? Right. So
Rattled.
they don't know what to do. They have these high-powered rifles. So they sit down and they start shooting the Killdozer from behind this old concrete Jersey barrier. You know, those little like kind of highway barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And Marv just opens fire on them. Right. And so he starts
so he's
shooting
just
at
going
them.
after the
He's
cops.
going after the cops. He doesn't hit anybody, but he just decides, well, screw it. I'm just going to try to crush them. So he swings it around and he just busts through the Jersey barrier. But again, keep in mind, it's not very fast. The Killdozer is not a fast
So everyone's
machine.
just like getting out of
Yeah,
the
so
way.
the troopers are able to jump out of the way and they all survived. But being thwarted by the troopers, Marv then goes for the next best thing and drives over under Sheriff Glenn Trainor's SUV, just crushing it. Then you remember like Glenn Trainor is one of the guys, he's the undersheriff, and he would just be like, yeah, Marv does really good work. He repaired my bumper. I just thought he was
Right.
a great
I love
guy.
that guy. Suddenly he's just crushing the entire police department's vehicles.
Right. So he crushes Glenn Trainor's SUV, runs over it like a tank, and then gets on the highway and heads straight to town. So police are moving to evacuate the town. They're all running around, and Glenn Trainor jumps his ass on top of the Killdozer and tries to get inside. So he's able to actually get on top. And
That's some cowboy shit. That's some Colorado sheriff, old school, like the runaway train is off the, tracks or whatever. Let's get in here and try to save these people type shit.
It really is. And this guy's amazing. He's just this guy. He's kind of balding. He's got a big old belly, and he like gets on top. He's just like what you would think like a small town cop. There's no murders in Granby.
Right.
He jumps up on the stage.
And he's like, bacon grease, man. I've been wrestling bacon grease in the backyard my whole life. This is nothing to me.
I mean, he's up there. So he gets on top, and it's all sheet metal except for this air conditioning vent. So Glenn stands up on the Killdozer and starts shooting into the vent. Nothing happens. Doesn't work. Doesn't do anything. So he stays up there, and he's just riding around trying to think of something. And they give him a bunch of flashbang grenades, and he throws them down in the exhaust pipe, trying to kind of like disable this vehicle. So it's, explosions. He's throwing flashbangs down the exhaust pipe. Nothing happens. Doesn't do anything.
Meanwhile, it's like an hour later to get to town.
It is like that. And then he's so like, but the whole time, Glenn Trainor's riding on top of this thing. So he's just like, well, whatever, I'll just sit here. And then Marv drives to Mountain Parks Electric, which is their electricity grid, just bashes that whole thing to the ground. And the whole time, Glenn is still just chilling on the roof.
Man, I would expect that just to equal a bunch of sparks and fires and shit, because that's what I think of when I think of destroying an electrical grid.
I mean, I think it didn't. He destroyed the building, and
it's probably just like computer ran at this point.
I mean, it might be. I think Transformers blow up and stuff. Whatever happened, Glenn survived, so he didn't die. He might have been too scared to jump off. I know I would be.
Yeah.
But once police start connecting the Killdozer to Heemeyer, they start to get a little more handle on the situation, and they're able to kind of anticipate his moves. So they start to evacuate the businesses and homes of his enemies.
Oh my God. How embarrassing is that to just, everyone's like, oh yeah, he's been having all these beefs with these people. Like, just for everyone to know what your like dumb issues are.
Right. And I think he did write like a hit list that he left in the garage. So they were able to find that too. But they were like, oh, it's Marv.
Did he leave it for them to find?
Nobody says. And I can't tell. But
he literally wrote a hit list like Steve Buscemi and Billy Madison.
I think that it's part of his manifesto. He's just trying to say, I mean, to him, it's not evidence. It's like proclamation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He's in a different state of mind than like, something you'd be worried that somebody would find.
Right. It's like manifesting your intentions or something. It's like you have to write it down every day.
Right.
Okay, I get it.
So now they know where he's going. They know that he's headed straight to Granby Town Hall. And the town hall is also on top of the public library, which is full of kids at the moment. So it's full of people.
Yeah.
And at this point, Glenn jumps off the Killdozer. He's like, I got to get off this thing. So he stops writing it. But Marv gets there. They were able to evacuate the whole thing because they know he's going to trash the town hall. And they get all the kids out. And Marv destroys the playground. Like, all of the structures are just spaghetti. He destroys the library and he demolishes the town hall right as, the librarian and all the kids are kind of being evacuated.
Come on, Marv. That's so uncool.
Well, he's just on one. So after a while, they figured out Marv was steering the Killdozer with 5 cameras that were mounted to the outside. That's how he could steer it, because there were no windows.
I get it.
And he had even rigged up this super complex system of air compressors to blow dust and debris off the lenses of the camera, because he knew he was going to be busting up ass. So he wanted to make sure that those were clear so he could see. So he had all these monitors on the inside of the Killdozer, and then these air compressors he could press and they would blow the air off of the camera lenses.
Is there a chance he was working with a professor on this?
No.
That's hella smart.
No, he's just a smart dude.
He's just like,
and he was divine intervention, right? It's like God was helping him.
Also, at what point did he start calling it the Killdozer?
I think that came later.
Okay, that was an after the fact thing.
It's like that's like kind of a folklore name, but it's just such a great name that it stuck.
I know. To me, it was just hilarious thinking about him like showing the insurance inspectors around. He's like, yeah, me and the professor are working on the Killdozer. I mean, ventilation cooling system.
So he continues on, and Marvin heads over to his arch nemesis, the Sky High News, where Patrick Brower was working. And that was actually a really close call. Patrick was in the building kind of trying to figure out what was going on, and they could hear gunshots because he's also shooting this gun, and they're shooting guns at the Killdozer, and it's all crazy, right?
Yeah.
And he's there, and a deputy calls, and he just yells at Patrick Brower. He's like, "You're on the list. You got to get out of the building." So they ran out of the back of the building right as the Killdozer took out the whole front part of the news office.
That's dramatic.
It's pretty dramatic. And this guy gave him a free half-page ad. He's just like, why are you mad at me?
Yeah, I guess people have been hating the media for a while now.
Yeah, and then Bauer actually tried to run out and take photos of the Killdozer doing its thing, but he almost got shot, so he bounced. He's just like, I gotta get out of here.
He's like, I run a small town newspaper. I'm not like a war zone journalist.
He was like really willing to do it. And he's like, yeah, 2 rounds went above my head. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go inside. So he takes out the Sky High News building, and then he heads straight to former Mayor Thompson's house, where his widow was actually napping. So the Thompson brothers, Larry and Gary, call their mom. They're like, you need to get out of the house. She's like, I don't feel like it. They're like, get out of the house.
Mom, you gotta go.
So they get her out of the house. And at this point, the police get their hands on this big ass gun. I don't know that much about guns. It's a .50 caliber silhouette gun, but in the documentary, all the cops got super excited about this guy.
They were like, we've been waiting for this.
It's big, right? So it's a big ass gun. They shoot the tank, doesn't do nothing. Nothing.
I'm just imagining one of those old school Gatling guns, where it's like with the I'm making a circle motion. I don't know anything about guns either.
Well, whatever it is, it doesn't even dent the Killdozer. And Marvin heads to the Thompson's mom's house and levels it. He levels their construction yard. He levels their shop. He flips over 2 of their semi-trailers, and then he shoves a pickup through the front of one of their buildings.
Damn.
He massacres their spot. And then people are just kind of slowly following him through town, kind of watching him, because it is a slow motion massacre.
And the gun thing, I'm guessing he's just doing that to terrorize people. He hasn't killed anyone yet.
No one knows.
Uh-huh.
It seems like maybe that was one part of the construction that wasn't as effective as he thought it was going to be. So I think it shot in a certain range, and whatever it is, people felt comfortable sitting on the ridge above the town and felt like they'd be fine. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that could have happened is that they weren't sure where the bullets were coming from, and they didn't know that the Killdozer also could shoot things, because everything's evolving really quickly.
I thought you said that they could see it shooting people back right at the beginning the
cops did, but once they get into town and the town is like, what's this Killdozer? I don't know if the information was being disseminated that quickly. I don't know if people really knew. And it has a gun.
Yeah, and the newspaper office is already demolished, so now no one's getting news.
Right. I mean, I just think it's easy. There's a lot of footage of people sitting on a ridge watching this whole thing go down. Mm-hmm. So my guess is that they probably didn't know how dangerous it was.
Did you watch footage of this Killdozer destroying buildings?
Yeah, and I listened to the tapes of Marvin Heemeyer, and they were pretty crazy too.
The tapes, is he recording while he's inside there?
No, but the manifesto is pretty wild.
No, but I'm just talking about actually watching this thing destroy buildings.
I watched that.
Awesome. Destruction is fun. My question is it satisfying to watch this bulldozer crush things outside of it hurting the victims?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild to watch. I mean, I love watching crazy disasters. It's pretty wild to see something happen that you never have seen in person happen before.
Yeah.
Or something like that. I mean, I think for me personally, I was kind of overwhelmed by the epicness of the concept of a Killdozer, but the sort of
mundane reality of it.
You know what I mean? It's they're going to rebuild those things. They're all insured.
Right.
The Thompsons are insured up the wazoo. Those, I understand that there's definitely a sense of loss, and I'm sure it feels frustrating to have your building destroyed, but at the same time, the money will be there for it to be rebuilt. So I kind of am what's your angle, Heemeyer? It's not going to permanently destroy the town. It is just almost like a tantrum.
For sure.
On its highest level. So that's what I saw. I was it's really wild.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you kind of, it feels short-sighted in a sense. You know?
Right. It's like, I mean, it's a huge dick move to destroy someone's house because that's like all their family stuff and like the things money can't buy. Like it's horrible. I don't know what I'm getting at. I've like worked demolition a few times when I was in my 20s and like so buff and cool. And taking a sledgehammer to stuff is satisfying. So on sort of like a grown-up psychotic level, I could imagine destroying stuff with the bulldozer would feel kind of good, and B, watching the video footage might also be sort of overwhelmingly like satisfying in a disturbing way.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad I hear what you're saying.
Okay.
So at this point, Marvin has destroyed a bunch of stuff, right? And he beelines over to the independent gas company. And that's basically a whole yard of industrial-sized propane tanks. And right next to that were this old folks' home and a bunch of houses in the blast area. So they have to evacuate all this stuff. And basically Marvin gets his Killdozer position so he can just start shooting at the tanks. He's trying to blow up these tanks.
Oh, fuck him.
And he just couldn't get the bullets aimed properly. There was like some sort of issue with how far he had backed up. Basically, like one of the things on his Killdozer was blocking the gun. So the gun was just like shooting into the side of the Killdozer, like a piece of the Killdozer.
Yeah.
So he didn't blow anything up. He just was like, I can't do this. And he takes off down the highway again.
Well, see, maybe God was there.
Helped him with that. Yeah.
Helped everyone with that. Damn.
So he takes off down the highway again and he heads back into town and straight for the Gamble's hardware and appliance store. And this store is owned by Casey Farrell. So he's one of the guys from the town board who thought Marv did a great job at the badge plant hearings. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
He's just trying to take out everybody that was involved in the badge plant hearings.
Right.
So at this point, the Killdozer engine actually starts to fail. So they see this big puff of smoke and then antifreeze starts leaking out everywhere, covering the sidewalk. And with the last bit of energy, Marv absolutely destroys Casey Farrell's store. He just crushes it. The only thing was he didn't know that this building actually had a deep basement in the store. So as the Killdozer was mashing it, the whole Killdozer falls into the basement and just gets stuck.
Oh, damn.
And he tries to get out and it overheats the engine and it finally just shuts off. So now we've got Killdozer smashed into this basement, surrounded by cops and SWAT teams, and the rampage is over.
Okay, no one has died, but he probably has guns in there.
Well, police swarm the Killdozer, and the SWAT teams and police try to get inside, and they try blasting the outsides with explosives, and they couldn't even dent it, so they're just attacking this thing. And they finally get a cutting torch, and after a few hours, they were able to cut into the air conditioning unit. And when they got inside, they found Marv, and he was dead with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. So Marvin Heemeyer himself ended up being the only casualty of the Killdozer rampage.
Oh, man. Well, I guess it's good news. I mean, I'm really glad he didn't kill anyone.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about that. I mean, obviously, you never want anyone to die. I wasn't rooting for him to kill anyone, obviously, but I just mean in order for this story to feel like, woo, you know, like, man, so he killed himself. So this guy, I felt like he had it all. He had a girlfriend at one point,
Well, that's what they said. And like, he had a ton of money. He broke up with his girlfriend over her smoking. I guess they had a big fight. And she was like, you're acting way too weird about this. So they broke up. But he had a ton of money. And before the rampage, he had sold everything. He sold all of his properties in his home. And he had the $400,000 from selling his muffler shop. And he transferred it all to his father, who then transferred it to his brothers and sisters. So he had gotten rid of everything. He had no money left.
And that all happened before he died.
Mm-hmm. Which also made it basically impossible for anyone to recoup any money from him to pay for the rampage.
Oh.
Because he couldn't get it back. His dad died, and then his brothers and sisters had the money, and there was no way for anybody to really get that money back.
Interesting.
Marv was cremated, and the Thursday crew snowmobiled up to their spot, and they spread his ashes over the snow in the mountains. And the town cut the Killdozer into pieces and scrapped it. And the Thompson brothers were kind of pissed about that because they thought they should have saved it and built a museum and made the town millions.
They were trying to flip it, man. They were trying to make some money.
They're like, I don't know why they did that. They just should have done that. They made so much money for the town. And the damages to the town are estimated at between $7 and $8 million at the end of the day.
Shit. Well, that's a lot of money, but it seems like in this town you can flip property pretty quickly.
I don't know. I mean, I think it did a lot of damage, but it definitely did a lot of damage, but it also led to a lot of improvements in the town and like brand new buildings and a new town hall and stuff like that. So I think there's good and bad things, but it didn't kill the town or crush the town or anything.
Right.
I would close with this quote. So one of Marvin Heemeyer's friends and a fellow Thursday crew writer, Stuart Spencer, said, quote, "He just spent too much time in a hot tub alone."
Holy moly. What a great quote.
Love this guy. He was just like, I don't know, man. He just spent too much time in a hot tub alone. He was a good guy. I'm not going to listen to those tapes. He just spent too much time alone.
He's probably right.
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was right. Just like, get out, get some fresh air, talk to people, I talk to my dad sometimes like over Christmas or something, and he'll just be like telling me these craziest theories. And I'll just be like, what? And he's like, what?
It's like, talk to your neighbors next time you see them. Say hi.
Or call me and just run it by me. He's like, so, I don't know. I guess life marches on, and sometimes you just sit around with your thoughts and you think, okay, I've got it. Yeah. I literally know what everything is all about. And then you tell your daughter, and she's like, what are you talking about?
Thank God most people are nowhere near as talented as
Marvin Heemeyer. Yeah.
Right. Shit. So hit us with your resources, Montgomery.
Most of this came from the documentary Tread by Paul Solette. It's a great, fun documentary with all primary sources, so he interviews all the people in the story.
Well, that's a great title too, because it's like the tread of the bulldozer, don't tread on me, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a really fun documentary. There's also a great article by Patrick Brower, who was our guy from the Sky High News.
Yeah.
The title of the article is "Tiff's Predated Zoning Fight Land Deal Issues Took Place Before a Town Squabble." It's not super catchy, but it has a lot of if you're curious about the ins and outs of what the Doge Chef said happened with the property, it's a little easier to understand than in the documentary. Mm-hmm. Also, all of the Marvin Heemeyer tapes are archived. So if you are curious about that and you want to hear them, you can just Google Marvin Heemeyer tapes, and they're all kind of public use.
What's the tone of it? Like, is he high pitched and out of his mind, or is he like relaxing and just sort of like wheeling and dealing?
I mean, it's a manifesto, so there's a lot of high pitched energy in there at times. It kind of goes in and out. There's a really sweet piece, there's a piece of it to me that feels kind of sweet, where it's just like he doesn't really know how to use the cassette recorder, and he kind of is like, I don't know if anyone is going to think this is interesting, but I'm just going to do it because my friend told me to do it.
Yeah.
So there's like a piece of it that feels kind of vulnerable, and some of it is just him talking about his life, and then a lot of it is talking about his philosophy about what someone is entitled to in this country,
which he feels like is a lot.
I think that my impression is that he's not aware of how different the playing field is for people who aren't him living in Colorado. You know what I mean? I think that he's maybe not aware of how actually horrifically unfair the playing field is.
It would sound
in this
like
country
it.
And around the world. So I think he has to presuppose a certain level of this is what was promised to me and this is what I'm owed. And what he thinks he's owed is really simple.
Yeah.
But I think that he's not realizing he's not the only victim of that, unfairness.
Not even close. In fact, it sounds like he wasn't a victim of it really at all.
Right. So that's
if he had put 1/10 of his energy put into the Killdozer into battling income equality or helping whatever other types of human beings also get a home over their head or whatever, then he would have done a lot of good for the world.
Yeah. Right. I'm not trying to like trash talk that. I just would say that my impression is that he seems really innocent, or unaware of like a lot to feel that disempowered from what happened to him.
Right.
Especially given the fact that he, even at the time of his death, like before he gave away his money, he was super financially solvent. Like whatever happened with his muffler business, like all of that kind of stuff, he was able to build this shop and sell the property for 10 times what he bought it for.
Right.
I mean, like he could have done so much with that money.
Yeah.
And he did do really well for himself.
Yeah.
He had a set of skills that wasn't diminished. He's still a good muffler repairman. Like you could go anywhere in the country and do that. So I think it just seemed it was just interesting because it was just felt isolated. It's like, this is my perspective. This is all that I see.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything else. And so therefore this is the truth, instead of being like, I'm curious about how the rest of the world lives.
Right. So was it your understanding that he planned to be dead at the end of this and that's why he gave his money away?
He didn't say it explicitly, but he danced around that. I think at times he was like, I'll probably die, or if they shoot me, I won't have a problem with that. It was a lot of like, I'm not afraid of the death, but not like, this is my plan.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of these stories, like people have a plan and it just almost never pans out the way they thought it would.
Yeah.
They're always pretty surprised at how it actually kind of came about. His friends argue that the reason why nobody died is because he never intended for anyone to die. He just wanted to destroy the town. I think that he thought he was going to kill a lot more people than he actually did.
Yeah.
I think, but the other thing is like, he might not have even known because he's just piloting it through cameras. It's like, he may not know that he missed everyone with his gun.
Right.
He might not know that he didn't crush anyone in these buildings because they were able to evacuate them all.
Right.
Whatever he thought in his last moments, like he really easily could not have known the truth of anything. He could have thought he killed 100 people.
Yeah.
He has no idea. So
God, that is heavy. And then it just ends with him like sunken in this basement.
Yeah. Stuck.
Like trapped. Yeah. That's heavy, man.
Yeah.
Shit. I don't know. You know what sounds pretty good right now is a hot tub and a beer. Thank you so much for listening to Muriel's Murders. Muriel did all the research and I did all of the recording, the editing, post-production, and it was recorded right here in our living room.
To help support the podcast and to unlock exclusive episodes, please sign up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/MurielsMurders.
Also, we invite you to connect with us on social media. Muriel and I make little bonus content animations for Muriel's Murders. You can find us at Muriel's Murders on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Plus, reach out to us. Our DMs are open, and you can email us at murielsmurders@gmail.com.
Please rate and review Muriel's Murders on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us grow. Just do it.
Our music is by Mario Castellini. That's my brother. You can find him on Instagram at Castellini Beats. And speaking of brothers, shout out to Johnny, Muriel's brother. I think he actually requested this Killdozer episode.
I forgot to say that. This was a listener request. He wanted me to do this months ago, and I'm super glad we did. And thank you to Ryan and Ryan at Campfire Media.
And if you want more Nick and Muriel minus the murder podcast part of this, please check out our other podcast, Hell in Your 30s, comes out every Monday.
That's it.
Bye.